Hi, this is PubShorts. My name is Dr. KK. I'm Innovation Officer at Trinka and Inago, and I have with me Tony. Tony?
Hey, I'm Tony O'Rourke. I'm a VP for partnerships here at Inago, and I work with publishers and universities all over the world and societies all over the world.
Right. So, Tony, for people who have joined in for the first time or exploring this, PubShorts for the first time, could you explain a little bit about Trinka, Inago, and PubShorts?
Well, let's take it from the top. So, Inago is a language services company. We specialize in providing a high-level editing and language services translation mostly for academic content, but we also work in other sectors. Trinka is a suite of AI tools that we use for editing and checking scholarly content, and it's being used increasingly by individual researchers and by publishers to validate their content. And actually, tell me, what's this? What is PubShorts? For those people who haven't seen PubShorts before, KK, how would you describe it?
Well, Tony, you and I have been having conversations about the latest news from publishing technology, language technology, AI, etc., which everything in the field of academia. So we decided to take it online, and we have an episodic live streamed show on YouTube and LinkedIn. We go live, but you can also find shorts of it in all social media. Just search for Trinka or Inago or PubShorts, and you'll find us there. And we try to keep it light. We talk about publishing and news, but we also try to keep it light. You'll get snippets of Tony's and my lives, our shared interests, like for example our passion for guitars, etc. But the main thing is news about publishing.
Cool.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. So are you ready, Tony? We have about 4 or 5 stories to cover in the field of publishing. All right. So the first story that we have is an AI scientist, and at this point, I'd like to share the context for the title that we have chosen. So Tony and I are both fans of music, and so this title is a play on a couple of songs by Coldplay, The Scientist and Fix You. We are big fans of it, and so the reason why we are talking about we have that title is that Sakana AI releases an AI scientist which writes scientific papers for $15 a piece. So Tony, first thoughts. What do you think of this?
Well, my first thoughts is $15. That's an amazing value. How can anyone do anything for $15? But it is an interesting story. The fact that the technology is now getting to the point where it's not just curating content, but it's actually creating new content. Right. I think is quite interesting. I mean, there are all sorts of sort of copyright and validation issues behind it.
Right.
That would, I didn't give anyone ground for concern, but I think it's a bold move, and it's certainly something which I'm going to watch closely.
Right. Let me go back to the story. So this is from a Japanese AI startup called Sakana AI. It's called the AI Scientist. It enables, I guess, it several research use cases using foundation models and large language models, and it is curated in collaboration with the Forster Lab for AI research at the University of Oxford, and also from the University of British Columbia. And it is capable of doing a lot of different things. And what I've read from this was the first sort of introduction. We have 2 other stories on it, that it can generate ideas, it can write papers, it can review papers, and it does really well. So I'll let you speak about what you think of this news story in a little more detail, Tony.
Well, one of the things I thought was interesting is how there seems to be sort of 2 divergent opinions at the moment. You've got someone like the European Union who are actively, going out there. There was an AI Act passed back in May where they were saying, well, we want to encourage the use of AI. We think that there is a role for AI in research, in technology.
Right.
And then on the other hand, you've got the National Institutes for Health who are saying, actually, listen, you can't use AI, you can't use any kind of generative AI, if I understand their side correctly, for any kind of research application or research funding. So there seems to what's interesting me is the dynamic, and I'm just curious to see where this is all going to end up.
Excellent.
Where is it going to lead?
So this is a nice segue. So the next story related to this is the Nature's, I think, an opinion piece by Nature. Now this is behind a paywall, but I've got a annotated copy, and I'm just going to go through some of the highlights. So first of all, from this article, the writer of the article thinks that the output is not earth-shattering, and the system can only do in the research in the field of machine learning itself. Remember, Tony, last week we talked about it, that you mentioned that it's not a wide spectrum thing, and they are also saying as a sort of a weakness that it cannot actually do the work itself. It can only sort of create sort of fake, I guess, generated work. So that's one point. And the couple of other points is that I think it is based on a large language model using a paper that describes a machine learning algorithm as a template. It starts from searching the literature. So it goes through the entire process. It searches the literature. Then it comes up with some content, and it uses something called as an evolutionary computation, which is based on Darwinian evolution. So it's iterative and it improves itself. And eventually it can also do a review of the paper. And there are different models and different sort of accuracies. I'll talk about that a little more in the next segment. But the two interviewees, I suppose, the people who are asked about this, they say that this entire idea that AI can facilitate let's say research, discovery, research related, in the sense paper reading, literature reading, and eventually generation of content or synthesis of content. The persons interviewed say that it's a reductive way of how things are. 5 hours of the example that they say is that the 5 hours of reading, let's say papers on a computer screen or whatever, it may not be as productive as a 5-minute conversation at a water cooler.
And what you've hit on the head there, I think, is one very good practical way of using AI is to be able to summarize content. I mean, look, every year there are 3+ million articles published in the scholarly world, in scholarly journals. No scientist, no matter how good or how productive or how prolific they are, can keep up with every single paper in the literature. Right. So I can see there is an actual good role. In fact, we've actually got tools ourselves where we're starting to do that.
Right.
In terms of being able to sort of curate the literature in a proper managed way.
So the people who are interviewed, commented on these kind of things as well as, the one, I think, consensus praise for this news story and the paper, which I'm about to show you, is that everything is out in the open. People can critique it and check out what it's actually done. And they have already found that it has a popularity bias. And that is classic with any artificial intelligence or any sort of machine learning algorithm. It keeps on giving you the most likely things that you want to read. So there is that problem. And they briefly mentioned that AI in general can be used for optimizing work for repetitive tasks and everything. So this is what I have. I'll quickly go through the next paper, the paper itself. So this is published in bilster45.github.io. This is a long document. So I'm going to just read out key findings and I'll hand it over to Tony to talk about it. So this, as I mentioned, the AI scientists successfully generated complete research papers. That is, when I first read it, Tony, this was a big red flag, including mathematical descriptions, experimental details, results, and future work sections at a cost of less than $15 per paper. It writes papers, but there is also an automated reviewer. It is trained on the ICLR 2022 open review data, which we talked about in the last episode as well. And it exhibited near human performances in evaluating paper quality, achieving 70% accuracy and surpassing human F1 scores. So human F1 scores are, if you're not familiar, it is a sort of a mean, I think it's mean of recall and precision, which are two items that are used to evaluate how accurate an AI is. And a couple of other things, and I'll let you speak. Claude Sonnet 3.5, it produced the highest quality papers. Now, this is the generative side of it. When different LLMs were compared in terms of what creates the best quality paper, Claude's Sonnet 3.5 outdid GPT-4o and several other things, including DeepSeek Coder and Llama 3.1 405B. And finally, obviously this, as I mentioned in the previous Nature article, the paper is self-critical and it cites several pathologies, it calls it, and such as lack of justification for design choices of the experiments, hallucination of experimental details, and positive interpretation of negative results.
And that's what concerns me more than anything else about this. First of all, you've got something which is only 70% with a sense of recall and precision score, which may sound quite high. But if there's a 30% risk of chance of it being wrong, it's wrong. It's not good enough.
Right.
Yes, it will get better and it will improve. But the fact it was demonstrating, it was hallucinating content. It was giving false positives or maybe giving a positive interpretation of a negative results. To me, that's not moving the science forward yet. And also, if I'm honest, look, this is computer scientists talking to computer scientists. If there's one space where I would expect this sort of research to be happening, it's within computer science.
Right.
And I'm sure they've been doing these experiments, not just recently. The experiments have been going on for some time, so that you can see the quality improving. But the very last thing in this, on the key findings, I think really highlights,
Yes.
where we are, is that what this highlights is, yes, there is a role for these AI tools, but it highlights a need for human intervention and for expert guidance.
Excellent. I mean, this is you summarize what I wanted to get to anyway. So they clearly state, the paper clearly states that there's a need for human oversight. Tony, where do you stand in terms of human oversight in the context of AI and any research task? I mean, you've already explained it. So let's talk about peer review itself. What do you think?
Well, again, with peer review, there is absolutely a role for AI in terms of helping to curate and bring together content, perhaps identify references which may have been missed out from the original content or the original paper. But I'm yet to be convinced that the AI tools at the moment, as they currently stand, will be delivering the kind of performance that a human editor can deliver.
Right.
But it's a watching brief. I'm sure as time will get on, one of the big challenges, and I've worked in publishing for a long time, in scholarly publishing for over 20 years. One of the big challenges in academic publishing today, and in particularly in scholarly journals, is the difficulty in getting reviewers. There's no question, there's no argument that there are more papers, there are more submissions. I mean, to get to 3 million published papers, you're probably looking at 6-7 million papers that are submitted in the world. So good reviewers are being contacted on a regular basis. Publishers have to set the rules in terms of the number of times they're allowed to talk to approach a publisher, a reviewer, to review a paper. So anything that can make the life of the reviewer more enjoyable, more palatable, can help them to reach a decision perhaps more quickly, is a good thing. But it doesn't replace the role of the human reviewer. It supports the human reviewer.
Completely agree, and that's why, as at least in our product environment, we are trying to develop products where the human is always kept at the forefront, and AI is always an assistant, and that gives the best quality. And I firmly believe in it. And we are hoping to come up with products that will help all stakeholders in the publishing ecosystem, also peer reviewers, soon enough with full security, data security, and privacy. Yeah.
I mean, there is one thing where I'm sure AI now can perform a task in terms of if a publisher receives a million papers a year, 100,000 papers a year, it has to make a decision. Is this paper good enough for peer review? And there are a number of criteria that they have to bear in mind. So if one of the criteria is the research accurate? Does the tables reflect, or does the data reflect the findings? Is it using tortured phrasing? Is it using paper mills to create this content? Is there any AI being used to generate the content? That's where the technology comes in useful, to be able to screen content and to be able to identify possible misuses.
Right, and
before peer review.
Yeah, and to add to it, I mean, technology has evolved. Large language models have evolved over the last maybe 2 years or so. So this is perfectly fine. What you described as paper screening, and AI is already mature. But what we are looking at, the future would be where there would be large language models assisting in a secure, ethical, maintaining research integrity. If helping peer reviewers and even journal editors to do their tasks at much higher optimization, efficiency, so that they can actually do, for example, peer reviewers are not paid and they are doing voluntary work, so they can probably spend a lot more time on their actual research work and maybe less time, but maintain research integrity in the context of peer review. So this is the future. And
if sorry to interrupt you, Keiko, I mean, if a publisher can provide a quicker result and still the same level of accuracy and the same level of rigor for a paper, particularly when they're launching new journals, new open access journals, for example, then it may be another reason why the researcher might want to consider that journal. If they know they're going to be published within 15 days or 20 days or 30 days, then perhaps it may take in other more established journals.
Right. So this is excellent. You've already segued to one of our stories later, but we have to go to our next story, which is also in the field of AI and publishing. And this is something, Tony, we have discussed in the last episode as well. It is related to intellectual property and data privacy. Another article from Nature. We seem to like Nature and its articles, right, Tony? Would you agree with that? We have a lot of
Nature publishes some fantastic content.
Right. So to summarize this article, what I want to quickly, so I have some notes here, which I'm not sharing. So this is again related to the legal aspects and the ethical challenges posed by generative AI and the tools related to it. And the author expresses concern that AI could disrupt the integrity of scientific research. And some of the things that are cited are that the big decisions are made in conferences across the world, and because LLMs are there everywhere, people are likely to be using it to extract information that they would have otherwise gone out there and read the papers or refer to the actual sources themselves. And there are problems with the large language models. They tend to create sort of like not very accurate summaries of things, and eventually that eventually decides some or helps in making some of the important decisions. So that's one aspect that the paper points. And the other one it talks about is that the intellectual property rights of the content that is being trained for the large language models. So the authors or the researchers have to have a say in it, and this is what it is. And I think I have an annotated copy here. So I've already explained the 2 points that I want to talk about, so I'll let you now speak about, again, this is a continuing thread. So what do you think about this?
This is something that I think every researcher should be worried about and should be concerned about, is how AI is using their content, and perhaps how AI is using their content to learn and to understand and to improve its knowledge, but that author is not being credited for that new piece of knowledge. Mm-hmm. So historically, in the last 5 years, the way a researcher can get tenure and improve in their career and rise in their career is, where are they being published? Where are they speaking? How are they being viewed within their research community? And what is the quality of their research? What's the impact that research is having? If that material has been absorbed into generative AI models and the author's not being credited, right, then that opportunity to further the research is lost. Right. And so I completely understand. In our business, for example, we work with universities and with publishers in terms of offering AI tools. And one of the things we have to be able to offer them is a secure model. So right. An assurance that any content that we're using AI tools to help the author to improve the content is not being used to train our AI. And that's absolutely crystal clear in those models. Yeah, so Tony's talking about Trinka and the privacy first approach that we have across the spectrum. So we do not retain user data or use it for training. So there is even an enterprise specific plan where you can opt out of it. So that's so important. Yeah. And I'm talking to publishers all the time about how their use of our tools in their particular workflows. And in every single conversation I have is, what assurance can you give me that unless we ask you to, unless we want you to build a publisher specific sort of universe, for us, that you will not use our content to train your AI. Perfect segue. So one last point that I have from this paper, obviously, there are studies out there which have clearly indicated that researchers, everybody is using AI, and there are artifacts of such use in published research and peer-reviewed research as well. So one interesting quote is that people who are using these models have no idea what they are really capable of, and I wish they'd take protecting themselves and their data more seriously, which is exactly, Tony, what we talked about in the privacy first concern. So this is an interesting thing. I mean, this is the third episode where we are talking about the privacy aspects of it'll keep on happening, the copyright and the intellectual property issue in the use of AI. So we look forward to exploring more in the future news stories. So are you ready, Tony, for the next go for it. Next item? I can never talk enough about it. All right, so just a second, I am loading a note here. So here we have a paper from Retraction Watch, and the paper is titled "The Publisher Retracts More Than 450 papers from a journal it acquired last year." So let me give you the first. So this is the 467 articles are from the Journal of Intelligent and Fuzzy Systems, which was acquired. I think a title it took on from it when it acquired iOS Press last November, and the publisher launched a thorough investigation into the journal in April, according to the spokesperson. And Clarivate informed us about concerns relating to the quality of some of the journal's content. And Tony, you mentioned peer review. The investigation in this Retraction Watch article found that the peer review process for some articles was inadequate, leading to the retraction of some of these articles. And he said that the submissions had grown significantly in recent years because the growth in the AI field, which the journal covers, reaching about
10,000 submissions last year. So I'll let you speak.
Journal.
Yeah. So you just mentioned there's a lot of papers coming in. We don't have enough reviewers, and this is probably the reason for poor quality peer review. So what are your thoughts on this, Tony?
Well, I kind of have mixed thoughts about this, really. I don't. First of all, I don't know this particular journal. I know of the journal. Certainly had a very good reputation in its space. It's another computer sciences journal. Excuse me. And it's publishing in an area which is very, very popular and very in vogue at the moment. So the fact that you've got a single journal that's receiving that many papers, and there's been I presume quite a dramatic rate of growth over the last few years, does make you wonder how the journal itself manages that inflow. What processes do they have in place? So what might have been considered perfectly good practice 5 years ago is no longer good practice. Some of the methods and techniques have changed over that time. So I think that so what Sage have done rightly, I think in this case, is following feedback from questions that were raised by Clarivate, who, as you know, are the producers of the Web of Science, a wonderful citation tool. Is they've highlighted the fact that there are question marks, uncertainties around some of the peer review processes, which might be could be citations that were used, it might be tortured phrases that were appeared in the context, and they were right to do so. And they were right to do so. My question about retracted papers, and I think I mentioned this in the previous PubShorts, is if you retract a paper if you retract a paper from a journal, and then that citation is therefore retractable, how does it change the actual research itself? If you've used that paper for your research, what right what should the author, the researcher, be doing to update their findings to reflect the fact that that paper is no longer, or at least that paper's been retracted?
Tony, you're giving me all sorts of segues for the next story, but we'll have to stick to this and finish it off. So the point of contact from Sage suggests that time pressure and the lack of responses from reviewers sometimes shifted decisions about manuscript to associate editors, and when they did trust the author, I would summarily remove them. This is what they're saying. So
which is the right thing. No, this wasn't Sage saying this. This was the former editor-in-chief saying this.
Right.
He was absolutely right to do so.
Right. Perfect. So you just mentioned we have another story regarding retractions.
So I would say this isn't the first story like this. I mean, if you look over the last couple of years, you've seen major stories of retraction by publishers like Institute of Physics. Wiley did a major retraction, a series of retractions of papers earlier last year as well. Right. And I think you're going to see this continuing as the means to be able to identify certain integrity issues in the paper are improving. AI is helping to identify those tools, those issues. I can only see more of these coming out. Right.
So Tony, I'm ready to move on to the next one, because you've already given me, I think, 3 segues to the content of this paper. So I'll share the screen again. So this is another exclusive from Nature. It is titled "The Papers That Most Heavily Cite Retracted Studies." Now, this is done by a famous computer scientist. I may butcher the name, so I'll let you say the name first so that I can say it. Guillaume Cabanach.
Guillaume Cabanach.
Guillaume Cabanach. Okay, fine. So this is a review paper about ways to detect human illnesses. I mean, this is about this paper, which is a review paper about detecting human illnesses by examining the eye, appeared in the conference proceedings published by the IEEE, and 60% of the papers it cited had already been retracted. Now that's a high percentage, and this was spotted by Guillaume Cabanach. I think I hope I'm pronouncing it right.
Good enough.
All right. It is spotted by a giant project by this Mr. Cabanach, I suppose, to find papers whose results might be in question because they cite problematic research. And this is, playfully called, or I think intuitively called, the feet of clay detector, which refers to an analogy originally from the Bible about statues or edifices that collapse because of their weak clay foundations. So I'll let you speak about it. So 60% of the papers published in an IEEE conference proceedings, I think. What do you think about it?
Well, let's say this. I'm sure this is an exception, and and I applaud IEEE for responding quickly to this as well and starting investigation into this.
Right.
It just highlights the fact that there have been methods and approaches used to create reference lists that publishers and reviewers haven't necessarily up till now been always able to identify.
Right.
Conference papers also, to a certain extent, and at least in my experience, tend to have less peer review rigor than research papers, because they're not necessarily being peer reviewed. They're just a reflection of a paper that's given at a conference, and therefore don't necessarily go through that same level of peer review. Although you can see that changing with other publishers now, but introducing more rigor in peer review into conference proceedings. But I'm sure this is one instance, but it's not going to be the only instance.
Right.
This has happened.
So another interesting name for me to pronounce. So the IEEE Integrity Director Luigi Longobardi says that the publisher did not know about the issue until Nature asked, and they are investigating it further. And so the research integrity, Mr. Carbonac has already created software to flag thousands of problematic papers in the literature for issues such as computer written text, which is basically AI generated, or text disguised as plagiarism. Now, that's not the only. This is one example. I think in the Feet of Clay detector, this was the second topmost ranking. But there are so many other papers or let's say research outputs which have retracted papers. And Mr. Carbonac hangs out in other social media and places like PubPeer. Tony, do you check out PubPeer and do you keep up?
I don't. I'm afraid no. I've never looked at it.
Right. So PubPeer is a place where I guess voluntary researchers or reviewers, whoever in the academia, they report concerns related to research integrity, and it's one of those places that I'm increasingly finding being reported as a source, like Retraction watches. And this Mr. Carbonac has explicitly flagged more than 1,700 papers that caught his eye because of some reliance on or retracted work. Now, this is obviously not nice, because a lot of researchers do not want to be told, in the sense that they have cited retracted papers, which is eventually it'll cause their own research. It'll dent their own research trajectories. So
Sure. I mean, and you know what? If I can insert a little advert break for a moment. We have Inago has, it's part of the Trinker toolkit. We have something called Reference Quality Checker, a reference quality report. And one of the reports we have to run is that retracted papers. Has this paper been retracted? So what we will do is we will let the publisher know, look, in this set of references within this paper, just to let you know and advise you that this one paper, two papers have been retracted.
Right.
What the publisher then does with that paper, with that information, is between them and the author. Does it fundamentally change the research? Does it fundamentally change the results of that research? I don't know.
Right.
But that's a conversation that the publisher has to have, and we and others are producing tools that will help highlight that.
Right. And perfect. Again, Tony, you're getting very good at segues. So the consequences of such. So what should happen to the original research where the retraction has been cited? So I just will read out from the paper. Some researchers argue that retraction of references in a narrative review, which describes the state of research in a field, does not necessarily invalidate the original paper.
Yeah, correct.
Yeah, but when studies assessed by a systematic review or meta-analysis are withdrawn, the results of that review should always be recalculated to keep the literature up to date, says epidemiologist who was interviewed for this, which I completely agree, because if a lot of data sources are coming from a retracted paper and we do not know the accuracy, then it can sway the results of a meta-analysis, etc. So I completely agree with this. And the last point, Tony, before I again hand it back to you, is that there are other tools like this. I think in 2016, some researchers from Oxford, UK, started designing a retractor bot. I see you smiling. Is there a reason why?
I think retractor bot is one of the best names for a retraction service I've ever seen.
Okay, I'll give you that. I did not expect that. Okay, I thought you might know the people. So anyway, Retractive Bot, very wonderful name, which automatically notifies authors by email when a study that they have previously cited has been retracted. I think it's a wonderful thing. I would like to know more about this. I haven't actually researched on this, but maybe I can do this. So what are your final thoughts on the retraction scene, if explained in the Carbonac story?
I think what this highlights, KK, is and we've been talking about AI for this, and every PubShorts conversation that we've had is the positive use of AI in terms of identifying issues when it comes to scholarly content.
Right.
Now, if perhaps a future application might be the AI then to perform the research within a particular paper and to do that redefinition, to do that reanalysis, that meta-analysis again, without using the retracted paper as part of its research findings. So I think there's all sorts of ways this is going to move forward.
Right. So, Tony, we have come to the end of the stories that are directly related to publishing, but we have one other story, which is probably the biggest tech story as of the last 24 hours. Yeah. So I'm going to ask you.
Apple.
Yes, it is about Apple. So, Tony, do you use Apple products?
I don't. I'm afraid I'm a slave to the Android.
So I had another question related to Android. Which brand of Android phones do you use?
I'm a slave to the Samsung Android devices.
Okay, so maybe 3 weeks ago, I think, if I'm not mistaken, Pixel phones had their latest iteration being revealed, and Pixel's phones are known for their AI-based photography. And currently, you cannot even call a photograph because you can do a lot of different things. You can put things in there, you can remove things from there. So, what is a photograph? Is a question. So,
well, that's a good question. Before I joined you for this webinar, I was watching a live stream somewhere else, and one of the ads that came up was for the new Pixel phone.
Yeah.
And the fact that you can insert your face or your body into another picture to create a better picture as far as the photographer might be concerned. Yes, I mean, what's real?
Right. So
what is real? We
do not know that, and we cannot. Probably it's a philosophical conversation beyond PubShorts. But anyway, we might be in a simulation. So I try to keep myself sort of on my toes in the sense that I have both Macs. Currently I'm talking to a Mac, but I also use a Windows computer. I have Androids and iPhones. I have two phones set up, and because the Mac and the, let's say, Apple devices in my life are primarily because of my musician, whatever task that I need to do, it's much easier to do it on those. So now I'm shifting to the story. This is the Apple's latest event yesterday. As of yesterday, it is called Glow Time. They announced the latest Apple phones, the Apple iPhone 16 series, and these are the first iPhones that are dedicated for AI, what Apple is calling as Apple Intelligence. For in the context of publishing, this is the most important thing. So they had already announced Apple Intelligence in the WWDC a few months ago, and so this iPhone 16 has been designed for Apple Intelligence from the ground up. And there is one more. Yeah. So what it does is that it surveys inboxes with summaries surfacing for emails and notifications alerted to provide summaries, as well as with priority notifications elevated to the top of their stack. So now we've talked about Pixel phones doing a lot of, let's say, image manipulation. Now we have the most popular phone in the world doing summaries and inboxes. So what is the future potentially more dangerous, or is it better? All of these are going to make
access to these tools is getting wider and wider and wider. And listen, applause to Apple for reinventing the definition of AI to Apple Intelligence. All credit to their marketing people for doing some fantastic work. It's just another step in evolution. In 5 years' time and 10 years' time, the conversations that you and I are having today will be almost seem ridiculous, I'm sure, because those will be everyday tasks. These will be everyday tools that we're using to support and to improve the quality of our lives. And we're just in the transition process.
Right. So, Tony, general question: in the publishing, let's say, in the world, academia world, do you see a lot of people using Apple, let's say, mobile devices and Apple computers these days?
Oh, I think it's fairly mixed. You always find Apple devices were being used in things like creative studios.
Right.
Journalists often preferred using Apple devices because it was easier to create creative content. Mm-hmm. I think it's probably no different now than it was.
Right. So so Tony, that I do some speaking, workshops for researchers across universities across the world. So when I go to some of these, and I'm surprised to see the amount of mixture. They use Chromebooks, they use Apple MacBooks, they use Windows laptops. So the fact that Apple natively is providing them with some useful and secure. Apple is very keen on security, just like how Trinka and Inago are in terms of data security. So from that point of view, I'm happy and I'm excited to explore this. I don't know when the latest iOS is going to arrive on my phone, which is a dated iPhone. But on this note, I think in the first episode, I think we talked about Gemini Polish, and Tony, you said that you will ask me how my experience has been. So I tried it.
How has your experience been?
I cannot try it because it is only available for, I think, Gemini Pro users. I have not subscribed to Gemini Pro, which is an expensive package for me. So I haven't done it. As in, I haven't explored it. All I know is that it is only available for select users in the Google ecosystem, as well as for select, I think, devices and plans, etc. Yeah. So I'm excited to check out Apple, and I'm planning, Tony, the next Android phone that I'm going to get, thanks to recommendations from somebody who you interact with regularly, is a Pixel phone, and I'm hoping to see how, at least on my mobile device, how Google has reinvented, let's see, photography and summarization, etc. So that's for another day.
I'll be interested to hear.
Yes. And Tony, I know that you are about to go on a big long drive for the apps conference. So could you explain what the conference is and what you're looking for?
Part of my role is to meet with publishers and to meet with professional societies.
Mm-hmm.
So this week is one of the, I think, premier events in the world of scholarly publishing, which is the ALPSP annual conference, which this year again takes place in Manchester. I think it's the third time it's taken place in Manchester in 3 years.
Right.
ALPSP stands for the Association of Learned and Professional Society Publishers. Full disclosure, for a number of years I was on the board of the society, but no longer. And it's a premier event for bringing together the good and the great of academic publishing, particularly in the world of journals and books.
And are you looking forward to any sessions?
I'm so busy. I'm not sure which sessions I'm going to go to. I know there's always a session on AI. There's always a session on open access. So I'll try and get to those AI-based sessions. But the thing I'm most looking forward to is my 200-mile drive each way, so I can get my audiobooks done in that time.
What do you drive?
I just drive a General Motors car. It was a General Motors car. It's a Vauxhall SUV.
Okay. And
I'm not a motorhead.
Okay.
Cars get me from A to B.
Right. So the last time we talked about a city, I think it was Boston and the record shops. So are there record shops in Manchester?
There are. I'm not going to have any time to go to them, but there are some fantastic record shops in Manchester. Yeah, Piccadilly Records, and there's a whole bunch I've been to many times. But,
right.
No time this time.
Right. And you mentioned audiobooks. What books are you reading or listening to?
Well, the book I listened to most recently is I particularly admire this guy. There are two David Mitchells in the world of publishing. There's David Mitchell, I think he's a crime author. I'm not sure. And there's also a comedian and entertainer called David Mitchell in the UK. He's I think he's Oxford, Cambridge. Certainly he's a very well-educated and an intelligent man who wrote a book called Unruly, which is it's kind of a slightly light-hearted but very informative look at the kings and queens of England from pre-Norman conquest, from the earliest kings and queens in the 4th and 5th century right through to the present day. Right. So that's absolutely fascinating and very funny.
What are your favorite genres in general for reading?
Historically, I used to read a lot of science fiction, being a bit of a sci-fi nerd.
Oh, really?
Yeah, sort of Asimov and Heinlein and all those guys. But most recently, I spent a lot of time reading books about music biographies. I have a very large collection of, a reasonably large collection of music books, over 500,
right?
And on different aspects of popular music.
We have to talk more about biographies, because I just read, I think, Bob Dylan's anthology. I think, Patti Smith, a couple of books. So interestingly, I'm a big science fiction nerd. I also read literary fiction and everything, but science fiction is my primary go-to, and I also read books. I'm reading a Ray Bradbury, a biography right now. To keep myself into, I'm an aspiring writer. Science fiction and magical realism and literary fiction are my focus. So I just finished reading a new science fiction author. He's called Charles Stross, and the book is called Glass House. It's a Scottish author. I'm mind blown by the concepts, and I've already sort of purchased a series of books by him. There's another book, Tony, that I'm reading. It's called The Snow. And let me just get the name of the author right. It is by Adam Roberts, and just a little teaser. It is set in London, and it is set in a future where there has been a snowfall which has not as it's continuous
Hasn't
snowfall
melted.
no for many weeks and months. There's just a steady snow, falling, and there are like 10-20 feet of snow, and people are walking across rooftops of London buildings and discovering ways to survive. So exciting times for me. I mean, set in London, and I'm discovering new things thanks to a book club that I'm a part of. So anyway, that's it.
When it snows in London, everything stops. I can imagine. I can imagine what his inspiration was for writing the book.
Right. So anyway, that brings us to the end of the episode number 3. The will the scientist fix your research? So is that a question that we can answer, Tony, right now?
No, I don't think we can. I think it's a question we're going to keep asking ourselves.
Right.
Hey, can I just say for those of you attending this podcast, listening to this podcast, I hope you find it interesting. If you've got any subjects or topics you'd like us to discuss, please feel free to reach out to either KK or me or just to inago.com. And we'll be happy to consider those topics for future podcasts.
Right. As Tony said, you can find us on all sorts of social media platforms. Just search for Inago or Trinka AI. We are on Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, I think TikTok and Weibo and WeChat. A lot of places. Everywhere. Yeah, if we just let us know. And Tony, if suppose somebody wants to drop a line, where can they find you on social media?
They can find me on LinkedIn. They can find me, and they can drop me an email at tonyo@inago.com.
All right, and you can find me I'm primarily on LinkedIn and on X right now. It's earlier it was called Twitter. You can search for my full name, and I'm generally hanging out there. But you can also write to me by email. You'll find the emails on LinkedIn profile. So Tony, that brings us to the end of PubShorts episode 3. Any parting thoughts?
Apart from the fact I need a cup of tea, no.
Okay, so I'll let you go get a cup of tea. So this is for everybody behind. There's a huge team that supports us to create such content. So on behalf of everyone, behalf of Tony, this is Dr. KK signing off for PubShorts episode 3. Will the scientist fix your research? And I will see you in the next episode. Bye, Tony.
Bye.